So, welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited today.
I am super excited to have you here. You and I have been talking about this for a very long time. And I'm also really excited because we're going to get to see each other in real life again after a couple of years. And to be honest with you, it's just great to see women succeeding in big roles in the industry. And your approach is inspirational and forward thinking. And I do love a pair of Crocs. So I'm really looking forward to our chat today. So let's just dive right in. I always like to start these shows by going on a journey with our guest. And because so much of what shapes us as people now is that journey we've been on. So take it back to the beginning. Did you always want a career in supply chain?
Does anybody answer yes, Sarah? Does
Most
anybody
people are like,
say I dreamed of, supply chain and container boxes when I was 7 and that's where I knew I wanted to be?
well, okay, I might be the exception, right? Because we've been talking about that stuff at the dinner table since before I could remember. And I think there are some people that do have dreams of being in supply chain now. But
Yes.
no, most people are like, I fell into the industry or it just kind of happened and I fell in love.
Yeah. Yeah. So it just kind of happened and I fell in love person. I think if I knew how spicy logistics could be, I probably would have chosen it as a career path. But my degree is actually in religious studies. So at the time, I thought I wanted to go be a PhD candidate and go on and teach in university. And then I realized that I didn't want to be in debt forever. So I actually took on a job that was a 8 to 5 job with Crocs as a customer service manager, and the career has just blossomed through taking on different challenges, asking questions, having amazing mentors along the journey, and I've earned every step I've taken, but I also couldn't have done it without Crocs and without people within the company enabling to make that happen. And I wouldn't change it for anything. I love logistics and supply chain and problem solving. And what's more important is we're creating history in supply chain right now because of COVID. And it's so awesome to be a part of that and to be with the Crocs brand during that moment too.
Yeah, I just got goosebumps. And actually, I just finished a conversation for the Hive by UPS talking about how the next 10 years are actually going to be the most exciting time to be in supply chain. So, if
Yeah.
you're listening and you're not in supply chain, you might want to jump into the industry. And if you're in supply chain thinking about leaving, don't leave just yet. Give us a few more minutes.
True, true. I think a lot of people say I'm interested in supply chain. Like it's a big, whatever supply chain is, it means a lot of things. So to that point, I did talk to somebody who was a college student at the time and they were interning with the company. And they said, well, I love supply chain. And I was like, well, what part of supply chain? And they said, well, I don't really know. And I think for the people who are like, I'm interested, but I don't really know, jump in and just start because you'll find whatever it is. If you're true to yourself, you'll find it because there's something for everybody somewhere in the supply chain realm.
Yeah, and you'll figure it out. And like you did with your career, hands on experience. You've been with Crocs throughout your whole career, and you've really been able to dive into different business departments, right?
Yeah.
And different departments of the actual business to get your hands on and learn. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about supply chain, it's interconnected with pretty much every single department in a business. And so
Yes.
to be able to get a good understanding of what goes on in each department really is to a benefit in a career in supply chain. And so now you're senior director of global logistics and supply chain network design at Crocs, which is an incredible role, but must be just crazy right now, especially around the network design piece because everybody's sort of trying to figure out where to spend their supply chain risk right now.
Yeah.
So tell us all about this role. What does it entail? What does a day in your life look like?
Yeah. First off, say that title 10 times fast. I think sometimes I've even stumbled over it, but it's amazing. I mean, I've grown into the logistics space. Like you said, I started in customer service and evolved into kind of the supply chain, into some analytics and kind of came back to logistics. But it means to me the customer is always at the center of whatever we're doing, right? It comes back to that customer experience, because at the end of the day, supply chain wouldn't exist without the customer either. So that's always my purpose when I come back and say, if I'm being a steward of the company, it's either because I'm doing what I can to protect margin, or I'm doing what I can to service the customer, and ideally both. But yeah, the role itself is a new addition to my title, is the network design piece of it. And I love the fact that at Crocs, we've chosen to put network design within distribution logistics and even within logistics, because I think a lot of companies are realizing that, you can have a great sourcing plan, or you can have a great destination footprint, but if you don't make sure those are connected effectively and can actually execute, it falls apart. And logistics in the last 3 years have really proven incredibly either enabling or disabling if you don't think forward and have the right relationships and strategy. So it's pretty amazing. And as a brand, Crocs has just grown year over year after COVID. And, we continue to see growth all over the world. We just acquired a new brand called Hey Dude. So we now have our own growth that we had ahead of us. And now we have to integrate a new brand into our supply chain and our growth strategy. So everywhere you look, it's kind of it's opportunity, but you've got to also say, how are we going to execute this, get control on the network, and try to stabilize despite the world around us, whether it's sourcing challenges, it's transportation challenges, it's destination footwear challenges, or even the final mile piece of it. So it's pretty fun because it's constant problem solving. And you're right, we're busy. There's no dull moment by any means.
Well, and think about it. If you're looking for something within creativity, network design, you know what I mean? Like you could
Yeah,
take what you like to do as a creative person and really turn that into a career within supply chain just through that network design piece. And it's really really smart because that really is a competitive advantage, is utilizing your supply chain, utilizing
yeah,
that network design as a competitive advantage and putting that customer first, but also knowing where your drop points are and where your risks, where you really want to take those risks.
yeah.
And so, you've worked for Crocs for nearly 13 years now, and you mentioned that you started off as a customer service rep, and you've had an incredible, career progression there. So, what is it that you love so much about the business, about the brand, that's kept you so loyal over the years?
It's such an amazing company to work for. I mean, you look at the shoe, and the shoe itself just is fun, right? And the company's done an amazing job of trying to turn that into work culture. So work culture, it's an amazing place to be. Anytime you ask somebody, what's your favorite thing about the company, they'll always say the people and the team. And I reiterate that it's such a fun and amazing place to be. The flip side is when we go out to the industry, it's a fun brand to represent. So I know I've said
Right.
the word fun a few times, but that's true. We get to go to the market and say, hey, we represent this brand. And people go, oh my gosh, that's really cool. What's it like? That must be so fun. And, you can start talking about what the supply chain is, what the product is. And a lot of people light up. A lot of people are really passionate about the brand itself. And then we get to bring that to our relationships and our relationship dynamics with our partners and our vendors and our approach. So I love that as a steward of the company, I get to be authentic, right? There's not a script that I need to enact to meet all of the tenets of the company. Me being true to myself gets to enact that. And I don't think that's common in a lot of places. And so I've had sponsorship in my career growth. I've had leadership take risk on me. But the flip side is I get to represent this brand authentically as a woman in supply chain, which is awesome.
Yeah, and you've mentioned fun a lot, and I know
Mhm.
you have fun with the problem solving aspect, but I do know that there's some supply chain professionals out there probably listening to this, pulling their hair out as we speak because
Right.
of all of the disruptions that we've seen over the last few years. And I've seen a couple of interesting articles about how Crocs avoided some of the pain of shipping delays and how you actually established a new distribution center to meet increased demand. It seems like you and your team have been incredibly proactive. Do you want to talk us through that and how you have put that forefront through all of this?
Yeah, I mean, first off, it's fun, but it's definitely not rainbows and sunshine all of the time. But you have to enjoy what you're doing. And I think that goes back to the if you want to be in supply chain, you're that person who's some people use the word masochistic, but just who enjoy challenge and who enjoy, constantly trying to solve and solution, and you find joy in that. Wherever you work, right, you've got to come to center about what brings you joy. And I feel like I've unlocked that, but certainly hasn't always been rainbows and sunshine. When we look at the Ohio facility, where we've just gone through so many different iterations of transformation in the last 3 years. And it actually starts back in 2018, maybe even 17. We were looking forward at our network and constantly challenging our network study. And I didn't run it at the time, but the leaders in distribution logistics looked at it and said, we have a warehouse that's in California, but our main client base is on the East Coast. And here's this Amazon Goliath that's changing consumer expectations to 2 days. And we're, moving ground or slower across the country in small parcel network. And the only way to compete is to start upgrading. You erode at that margin by pulling the upgrade lever of 2 day in a parcel network. So that was a huge piece of the business case to move to Ohio. And I'm so glad we did, because trying to execute peak season out of Southern California now, I mean, it was challenging before COVID, and carriers are struggling through it. And then we've been able to leverage diversity through ports. I mean, these were all benefits that nobody could have obviously seen COVID happening, but they're levers that we've been able to get to pull since we moved. And then we went live at the end of 2019 and into 2020, and then COVID happened. But one little caveat is, when we went live, we were out of capacity of the building. It basically,
Wow.
the brand took off so much, even in the time it took us to build the building, that we couldn't execute the business. So we had to pull the lever quick. And so that's the a couple of the articles that are out there about our kind of pop-up distribution center that we worked with Six Rivers to be able to perform. And even that was a lot of work to try to execute that and try to execute peak season of 2020. And if you step back and think about the internal dialogues that had to happen, where, we thought we were going to pull that lever, COVID happens, you close down your business just because everybody did. And then you turn it back on because now everybody wants, comfort in their foam shoes at home. And we've got to react to have the biggest peak season that we've ever had out of that new facility that we opened. So a lot of hard work in the team members to come up with solutioning that pop-up center. And then that's actually temporary. That's not intended to be long term, because we are putting more investment into more automation in that Ohio facility to continue moving those pairs. So ton of work has gone into that. And then you think through all of that on top of, COVID disruption at the ports, COVID disruption in production, kind of anywhere you look in supply chain, there are these, I call it market conditions, because they're things that we can't control. There's a
Yeah.
lot of market conditions that you have to step back and navigate through and think, okay, how do we get ahead of it? And what are the ramifications of trying to get ahead of it? Because naturally, even if you take a step towards the East Coast ports to avoid the West Coast ports, there's ramifications, and we've got to make sure
Yep.
you weigh those out and understand what those are. So yeah, it's a lot of collaboration across the teams.
Yeah, well, you know that I love that word collaboration, but I think that the success of everything that you're talking about really comes down to your leadership. So that let's talk about that a little bit, because from what I've seen and from the research going into this particular episode, your approach is very innovative, strategic, and agile. And that was even before the pandemic. And those are all very on trend. They're all growing in importance and really crucial to good leadership in supply chain. So,
Yeah.
how can more business leaders across the industry better nurture that kind of mindset? Like, what kind of advice would you give to leaders in supply chain right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is going to be executive support and buy-in, right? So we have an amazing leadership team who is understanding of supply chain, they're understanding of disruption in the supply chain, and they're constantly willing to be innovative. So you certainly have to tell the story about how taking steps A, B, or and C might positively impact the business, but we're not up against leadership that say, no, we have to do it this way. And I think,
Mm,
if anything, leadership that is saying we have to do it because we've always done it that way, or change is too much, or the change might cost us more than we think it's going to cost, is actually going to just make the company be very stagnant. So being a young brand, being a leadership, or having leadership that have either been in footwear or have been in consulting firms in the past, I think it just enables innovation. And it also creates I call it air cover, but the culture where we have the sponsorship to go and take on risks, right? So I think a good example of that is recently we went to them and said, hey, 3-year ocean freight contracts is not particularly standard for shippers our size. We're not big enough. And so, but we're going to go do this, right? We're going to try and push our partners to see if they'll do it and think outside of the box and work heavily with them. And we explained everything to our senior leadership. And they basically said, as long as we can pay less than we had to pay, on spot
Mhm.
market and trying to survive the last 12 months, let's do it. So, I think that stakeholder buy-in and education is so critical to enabling the rest of the steps along the process. Otherwise, it just comes down to building a financial business case and making it justified. I mean, that's the second piece. Is it always comes back to the finances.
Yeah. So business leaders, listen to your supply chain professionals. It's why you hired them,
Hmm.
and let them guide, the supply chain and where it needs to go. And those conversations with the partners, like you said, right? It's just sitting down, having a conversation, saying, here's where we're at. They're like, here's where we're at, and sort of coming together for that collaboration.
Yeah.
But staying on topic of trends, I wanted to talk to you about sustainability and social responsibility because from my research, Crocs has an entire philanthropy division, which is great to see. Tell us about that, why it's so important, why increasingly, customers are actually demanding it, and what does it mean to you personally in your career and as a woman in supply chain to work for a company where you have the opportunities to, really give back to the community.
I love it. I think Crocs Cares has always been around as long as I've been at Crocs. There's been something that's called Crocs Cares as a program, but it's been pretty on the down low. And so I love that we were able to pull it together into a organized, branded story that's really about carbon and community and people centric design. And so Crocs has definitely made some very public statements last year that I was so enthusiastic that they actually stepped up and said, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to show up. So one of them is that we're going to be 50% carbon neutral or reduce our footprint by 2030. We have kind of comfort with carbon. So that's working to try to have net zero brand innovation, comfort through communities. That's donations, which Crocs did quite a bit in 2020 for healthcare donations. And I think that's where a lot of people became very aware of the donations. But we've done
Right.
them all along. So we continue to have done them. In Colorado, there was a fire that was basic at the beginning of January, at the end of December, and we donated quite a few pairs to local Coloradoans who lost their homes.
Wow.
And then comfort for all people is the last one. And I love this one because I think it's what really makes it authentic. I think it's one thing for brands to say, hey, we're going to be carbon neutral or we're going to be net zero or right. But it's another thing to show up genuinely. And one of the best things about Crocs is it's a brand that invites you to be authentic, right? And I think that that's where it all ties together because you can care about your community, you can care about your world, and you can care about your brothers and sisters and LGBTQ and everybody, and take care of each other. And Crocs is all about that. So to me, that's where I really love it. And I'm more than excited to get to lead the supply chain and logistics space as we start to work through carbon neutral and defining what that means to get it all the way to consumers' doors and continue to delight the customers too.
Yeah, and be a leader in that. And
Yeah.
so, for those of you listening who are maybe looking at a career in supply chain, really take a look at the companies and organizations that you align with. Because what Mary is really talking about is being herself, and then also being herself within an organization that accepts her for who she is and gives her opportunities to really, not only put in the hours to work, but also put in the hours to the community in ways that they're sort of allowing you to do that, right? They're just
Yeah.
giving you that space and allowing to be for you to be who you are.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, as a woman, what has your experience been in such a male dominated industry? I mean, I speak to a lot of people who are often the only woman in the room, which
Mhm.
happened to me a couple times. What was that your experience? What does that look like for you?
I sometimes I catch myself looking around the room and I go, "Yep, I am the only female in the room." But I am so proud to be able to say that the majority of our C-suite at Crocs are all women. So I think some of the men at our C-level look around the room and go, "I'm the only." It's the exact opposite dialogue, but that's within Crocs. I think it's been a real goal within Crocs to continue to elevate women, and I feel like that's been an awesome opportunity for me to take advantage of. But certainly in logistics and in supply chain, yeah, it is a male dominated industry. But I have to tell you a little story of my first TPM. So
Yes.
I was just starting in kind of logistics and supply chain. I was running an RFP. I was making carrier decisions and strategies. But to be honest, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just executing and being basically procurement in a lot of ways. And some people joined our company, and somebody who had a lot of logistics background kind of took me in and mentored me. And he pulled me aside one day and said, "Mary, you're really good at this. Like, you should do this. Have you ever thought about this as a career?" And I said, it's just so much, there's men everywhere. And I don't really want to play the boys game, honestly. Like, I'll just take their numbers, I'll run them, I'll challenge them, but like, I don't want to be a part of that. And he was like, "What? There's women everywhere." And so TPM was only like a month and a half away. He was like, "We're going to this conference called TPM," which I had no idea even existed, to be honest. And he made a point, he went out of his way to be able to introduce me to all of the women he had interacted with in his career at a prior shoe company. And I'm still good friends with many of those women today. And it was definitely a moment where, I realized you can choose to see all of the men in the room and get overwhelmed, or you can choose to see all of the amazing women in the room and get motivated and go and stand next to them and be a part of that. And that was a transformational moment for me. That this mentor is really one of my first mentors in the logistics space. Mike Gavley, he helped me open my eyes to the fact that your outlook can determine your potential in a lot of ways. And ever since then, I've had amazing women I've been able to reach out to and build an awesome career with, and grow. Don't get me wrong. I think there are a lot of men who are enabling women for success too. And I think that we often can get rah, 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 women in the room, but just as amazing are the men who step aside and make room for amazing, strong women to be able to come to the table and be part of those conversations too.
I love that. I got goosebumps all over because it's all about perspective.
Yeah.
It's all about how you see things. And we are starting to see, more diversity on industry stages and in industry conferences. And I remember, 3 years ago, we had a bunch of women get together at TPM for a dinner.
Mhm.
And we all came together, and I thought that was just such an amazing experience. And that's where you and I met, really.
Yeah, yeah. That was like, it was an ad hoc dinner. One of my
Yeah.
other friends said, "Hey, you should join us because all these other women are getting together." And that TPM, I had crutches because I broke my leg skiing like 2 months beforehand. And let me tell you, doing TPM with
Oh,
crutches,
no.
oh,
No,
good
no, no,
golly, that
no,
was
no.
painful. So I was just happy to sit down at the table. And I remember sitting down at the table, putting my crutches aside and just being like, "Oh, I can sit down." And then I hear the woman next to me sighing, and she's like, "I just took my high heels off under the table." And we were all like, "Yep, cheers. We are here together."
And that's really funny because I just posted a picture of my conference footwear, and it looks very different than it did in what, 2019,
19
because it's all not sneakers, but like
flats.
flats or nice, not even running shoes. I don't even know what to call them. They're like lifestyle
They're
shoes
not
now.
stiletto heels anymore. That's the point, right?
No, not even kitten heels. Maybe a little bit of a platform,
Yeah.
but we need to get back into what brings us comfort, right? I think
Mhm.
priorities changed and shifted for me during COVID in the fact that no, I don't need to sit down at a table at the end of the day and take off my heels for just 5 minutes because my feet hurt so much, and then get that one little teary eyed when it's time to go and you have to put them
Put them
back
back on.
on.
I'm pretty sure I remember somebody just carrying their shoes out of the restaurant and saying, "I'm not putting these on again."
Oh, I'm so with you. I'm so with you. So let's go back to what you said about mentorship.
Yeah.
You said that you've had quite a few mentors. What do you think about mentorship? I know that I've got a lot of people that do approach me for mentorship. I ask a certain amount of questions because at the end of the day, mentorship for me needs to be a two-way street, and so I
Yeah.
want to know what they want to get out of it. What are they looking at it from my point of view and expectations? What do you think about mentorship? How do you kind of approach it?
That's so critical. I think that, and I even catch myself doing this where I think, I'm gonna ask for help with that, but I want to reflect so hard on what am I asking to gain out of this? How am I going to make this worth somebody else's time? Because yeah, I've had people approach me as well, and if they say kind of like, I don't know, I'm just really inspired by you, and I'd like to spend time with you. That's wonderful. We can go and get a cup of coffee. I think that's great, but that's not mentorship. Mentorship is where you need to get somewhere and you see that somebody else maybe is already there and has been there in their journey and they can help lead you and give you feedback that is candid and safe to be able to grow. And so that's probably my first biggest, I guess, advice is if you're thinking you need to lean out and ask somebody for mentorship, think about what you're really asking for and be really focused in that. And then the second piece is, yeah, mentorship can be amazing when you unlock that potential of it's a two-way street and you both get to grow together. I would not be where I am without many women helping me mentor, and it's not always, and men, and it's not always about mentorship that needs to happen, for months at a time. Sometimes even just one conversation where you can be really vulnerable and open can unlock potential. So I think I'm always willing to support people when they come and ask for help, and I know that I'll continue to need mentors for the rest of my career.
Yeah, and going into it, knowing the work that you're going to put in and being very conscious of that from the other side's perspective and being very forthcoming with that as well,
Yeah.
in the fact that you know what you need, you know what your ask is, and you know the level of effort that you are willing to put in, which I think is huge. Was there a moment in your career where you found your voice? Because for a lot of people, right, you're sitting in a meeting, and I know for me, especially at the beginning of my career, I was like, "Do I? Don't I? Do I? Don't?" The butterflies kick in, the heart's pounding.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you?
You know, I really reflected on this question because the answer is no, it wasn't just one moment. It was
Mm,
an incremental subset of a lot of little moments. And
yeah.
I kind of think of it as I've picked up running recently. So if anybody who's into running, they'll understand that if you say I'm going to go run a half marathon or I'm setting a big goal for the end of the year of a full marathon, you don't just put running shoes on and go run that distance. You have to
True.
show up multiple times throughout the week. You have to do strength training. You have to put the work in, and all those little tiny things that you do incrementally all enable that moment for you to run across the finish line. And so for me, I look back on this and I wouldn't say there was one definitive moment. I would say there were a lot of little moments. And for me, finding my voice and being able to be authentic probably was more about a lot of little moments that helped me tear down my internal barriers that were holding me back. So, like I said, my degree was in religious studies. I took an hourly job as a CSR. I asked questions. I had mentors. I Googled and YouTubed and did Supply Chain for Idiots was definitely a book on my desk at one point, as well as Excel for Idiots, right? I self taught and leaned out in the industry. And I had many conversations with people saying, should I keep just getting real life practice or should I go back to school? And everybody kept saying, real life practice, just
Mhm.
focus on real life practice. And so that came with managing. Right, the imposter syndrome is the key term there. A lot of people use, but for me, it was reframing how to not look at why I was not fit or not capable or where I would fail and not look at the negatives, but instead say, actually, here's where I could be successful and here's what could make me enabled to do something. And that was a mental shift that just it doesn't happen overnight. It happens with
Mhm.
small little moments along the way. And certainly women and men saying, hey, you should come speak on this panel. And me saying, are you sure? I mean, you and I had this conversation where I'm like, Sarah, why would you want me on your podcast? I'm just little old Mary, right? So finding my voice came with time, but it came with so much internal work to really stop asking, myself why I'm going to fail, but instead start asking myself, why wouldn't I succeed if I took some of these risks and steps?
Yeah, and what do I need to put into place, or what do I need to learn, and what courses do I need to take, or what videos do I need to watch to
Yeah.
learn more about this so that I will succeed. And I love that mental shift. And I also like your analogy around the running, right? Because even as an entrepreneur, right, and a
Yeah.
business owner, it's everything that you do on a daily basis.
Hmm.
You might be
Hmm.
doing little things for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it's that consistency, it's that effort, it's that, just doing it and, having those nerves and doing it anyways and having the nerves again and doing it anyways
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really how you move forward and get that done. So I love that, and thank you so much for sharing that. So what does the future hold for you? Are there any new skills you're looking to master, new projects in the pipeline?
I'm eyeing continually how to become an executive in a company. So certainly those are conversations I'm having actively with my leadership.
Awesome.
So continuing to evolve from being kind of that good, strong individual contributor where everybody said, yeah, yeah, Mary's got it. We don't have to worry about logistics to, okay, now Mary's got more in her scope and she's tackling more. Certainly the excitement of everything we have going on between Hey Dude and Crocs and supply chain and growth. There's so much we need to do that it's I feel like I'm making history in supply chain. I'm making history at Crocs and with Hey Dude, and I'm defining my career. And this is the moment. And so I'm just excited to live honestly through the next 12 months because 12 months from now, I think it'll be a different conversation. But in that moment, it's also continuing to be okay being vulnerable, continuing to be okay asking for advice or help, or coming to the table and not thinking I know everything, and instead leaning out to community and resources, having mentors, and really focusing on that career path. And then outside of work, like I said, I'm going to do a marathon. So I got to do all of
Woo!
this and then find that time for that marathon. I think those are if I could close out 2022, those are some of my big goals.
Good for you. You will not see me running a marathon anytime soon. That is not one of my favorite things to do.
Mm,
I'd rather play baseball, so you'll see me on the baseball
there you
field.
go.
Hopefully this year, because the last 2 years have kind of been a crapshoot with that. So finally then, what advice would you have for anybody that is really looking to get into supply chain, but maybe more specifically girls who are looking at careers in supply chain, or women looking at careers in supply chain?
Yeah, I think I said fun a lot earlier in the podcast, and I think it can be fun if you're true to what really interests you and is passionate to you. So, my first advice I would say is be honest with yourself if you're finding joy in it or not. And God, that's true for any career, not just supply chain. But I think a lot of people stumble into supply chain, and if they're honest with themselves, they say, "Actually, I do want to." Evolve in the world of shipping containers, even though nobody around the dinner table knows what I'm talking about, right? Um, the second thing I would say is there is celebration in every step. So, like I was saying, it was incremental steps that get you there. You don't start at the summit. You start at the trailhead where you parked your car. You have to put your bag on, one shoe on at a time, right? So go slow, be kind to yourself. Ask for help, ask for mentors. The community in the logistics space is so amazing, and you're active on LinkedIn. And if anybody kind of would say, hey, I need help in this area, I know they could drop you a note on LinkedIn in 2 seconds. You'd be like, here's 10 names, go talk to them, right? And the community is so excited to continue to bring up new people into the community and to build their own community. So I think those are some really important things in this time of quote unquote the great resignation. It's so important to be authentic and to find out what makes you tick and really foster that, both in terms of community, but also how you show up and how you show up for your team and your leadership team, as well as the team that reports into you or that your peers too. So it's just a few things, but it sounds so easy. There's so much introspection and vulnerability. Like, go get a Brene Brown book, spend some time with it. Um, but supply chain and logistics is such an amazing place if it's something that makes you tick.
Amazing, amazing advice. And going back to your analogy of parking the car and hiking to the summit, make sure you drink lots of water
Uh-huh.
along the way.
Self-care is an important thing. Yep.
It's so true. I talk about it all the time on LinkedIn. Well, I really love that. I mean, so much of what you've said today has resonated with me, has fascinated me, and inspired me. Your attitude and approach is amazing, especially in the face of disruption and demand. And I think our listeners will really have a lot to take away from our discussion today. And Mary, I just want to say thank you so much for being in my community and my circle and for embracing me 3 years ago, when I was there with Let's Talk Supply Chain, and it was, this little thing that I was trying to build. And so thank you very much for joining me today. You are amazing again, and I'm so happy to have you part of the Woman in Supply Chain series. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I love the community and love what you're doing.